Have you ever wondered how these massive online stores, the ones we all use, somehow manage to work perfectly, even on the craziest shopping days of the year? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the secret sauce that keeps the whole thing running smoothly. All right, let's get into it.
Really think about that for a second. You've got millions of people, all at the same time, clicking, searching, adding to their cart, and trying to buy something. If just one tiny thing goes wrong with the search bar, or even worse, the payment system, it could be an absolute disaster. So how on earth do they stop that chaos from happening?
Well, the stakes could not be higher. We are talking about a global market that is worth trillions, with a T, trillions of dollars. So when you're playing at that level, good enough testing just doesn't fly. You need a system that's not just good, but rock solid, super efficient, and pretty much foolproof. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to lay out the e-commerce puzzle itself. Then we'll dive into the solution, this really cool concept called data-driven testing. After that, we'll look at the data that fuels it, see how it's used to automate an entire store, and finally we'll take a little peek into what's next for the future of testing.
Okay, so let's start with the puzzle. You've got what feels like an infinite number of products, users, web browsers, phones, and ways to pay. How can you possibly test every single one of those combinations? That's sheer complexity. That's the real challenge for any big e-commerce site today. The answer, it turns out, isn't to work harder, but to work smarter. And that brings us to the absolute core of this explainer, data-driven testing, or DDT for short. It's a really elegant strategy that's designed to tame all that complexity.
So here's the big idea. Instead of writing a brand new test for every little thing you want to check, you write one single, reusable test script. And here's the magic part. The test's logic, what it does, is totally separate from the data it uses. This means you can take that one test and feed it hundreds, maybe even thousands of different inputs. It's a total shift in thinking. You go from testing one thing at a time to testing the entire flow of data through your system.
And this slide just makes it so clear. The old way was a slog. A new user, you write a new test. A new product, another new test. It was so repetitive. But the new way, with DDT, is just incredibly efficient. You build the test engine one time, and then you just keep feeding it different fuel, different data, to cover a ton of different situations. It's a massive leap forward.
Right, so if DDT is the engine, then data is the fuel. But what kind of data are we actually talking about here? Let's break down the essential types of fuel you need to power a really solid testing strategy. First up, you've got user data. This is your bread and butter. Different email and password combinations, different user profiles, various shipping addresses. You got to make sure the basic account stuff just works for everybody.
Then, of course, there's product data. This means testing with all kinds of product IDs, different prices, weird categories, and various stock levels to make sure the catalog and especially the search function are totally reliable.
And now for the big one, payment data. Testers have a whole arsenal of fake credit card numbers for every brand you can think of, plus different digital wallets, just to make absolutely sure that the most critical part of the whole process, getting paid, is completely flawless.
Okay, this is where testing gets really clever. See, it's not just about making sure things work when they're supposed to. You have to see what happens when things go wrong. This is what we call boundary and negative data. You're intentionally trying to break things, testing empty logging fields, bad email formats, or expired credit cards to make sure the system handles errors gracefully instead of just, crashing and burning.
And finally, for any company trying to go global, there's localization data. This is all about testing with different languages, different currencies, and all those weird regional formats to make sure customers in Germany have just as smooth an experience as customers in Japan.
All right, so we've got the concept and we've got the data. Now let's see how it all clicks together. How do you actually use all this to automate the testing for a huge, complex, live online store?
This next slide is basically the master plan. Think of it as a blueprint that shows us the most critical parts of an e-commerce app and exactly what kind of automation strategy you need for each one. What's so cool here is how this blueprint connects the why with the how. Take a look at cart and checkout. Why automate it? Well, because it has a direct impact on revenue. Same for payments. It's high risk, so it needs super rigorous testing. And you can see the tools for the job right there. Things like Selenium, which basically mimics a user clicking and typing in a browser, or API tests, which check all the invisible communication happening behind the scenes.
So we keep talking about how efficient this all is, but what does that actually look like when you're writing the code?
Well, the next slide gives us a perfect little example.
Now, you don't have to be a coder to see that power here. This one little chunk of code sets up 4 totally different tests for a login page. You've got one that should work, one with a wrong password, and 2 that test those weird edge cases we talked about. A single test function can now run automatically against all 4 of these, saving a ridiculous amount of time.
So this approach is obviously a game changer today, but its importance is only going to get bigger. And that brings us to our last section. Why is this data-driven model so crucial for the future?
Looking ahead, things are only getting more intense. The sheer scale of e-commerce means you need incredibly fast testing cycles. AI is now jumping into the mix, promising to make our tests smarter by predicting where bugs are likely to pop up. And customers expect a perfect experience on every single device, period. At the center of all this is the need for a flexible, scalable foundation, and that is exactly what data-driven testing gives you.
And that really brings us to the key takeaway. When you combine a strong data-driven framework with the power of AI, you get a system that can finally keep up with the insane complexity of modern e-commerce. It's how you make sure everything works for everyone, everywhere.
And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. It's one thing to test an app and make sure it works right now. But the real question you have to ask is your testing strategy smart enough, fast enough, and scalable enough to be ready for whatever challenges are coming next?